Hello everyone, it's Tanya Williams here, founder of the Childfree Choices program and author of A Child-Free Happily Ever After. Now I am really excited because I am talking today to Louise Olsen, better known perhaps as Auntie Julia, aka Not the Mama. Good morning.
Hi.
Where you are.
Yes.
Welcome.
Thank you for having me. I'm so happy to connect.
It's been great. I know I've been following you for a while, and I think we've sort of been following each other and virtually stalking each other, I suppose, to a certain degree.
Yes, definitely.
Do you want to introduce yourself a lot better than what I have done there, and then just tell people a bit about your story?
Cool, yeah. So as Tanya said, I am Julia Louise Olsen, and I started the podcast, Not the Mama with Auntie Julia, about almost a year ago. I started it really to foster a conversation about primarily focused on women who are choosing or considering choosing to not have children.
Yeah.
I myself consider myself to be child-free, but I don't know if it was something that I came to as a deliberate choice or if it just kind of naturally happened. So I really wanted to start having talks with my friends who I knew were in similar places, thinking about the conversation in a more deliberate way. And also to expand the conversation to not just be about our personal choices, whether to have children or not, but how we can better connect to our friends and family who have kids, and what the politics of being child-free are for, women in the modern day, and also just to have fun and a nice creative outlet.
Yeah, I love everything you just said. I think, and I'm some of the podcast episodes are absolutely hilarious as well. So,
well, I'm lucky in that my pool of friends are primarily stand-up comedians in the States. So I'm lucky to have a lot of performers in my life.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm getting better as a host because of them. But yeah, I also want it to be, I want to have this conversation be joyful and not so heavy, because of course, conversations surrounding fertility or infertility or motherhood in general, whether you're choosing to be a mom or not choosing to parent, can just kind of be a lot. And I feel like everyone's
so much emotion involved in it as well, which is,
exactly. And I just feel like I really do want to highlight joyfulness, because that's also more fun to listen to. But it's also, like you can talk about heavy things in a way that don't always have to feel so heavy. So that's a goal.
I think, and exactly, it's the angle that you take with it, and the positioning you give it as well. I think exactly that. So many people want, as soon as you mention the word, child-free or the whole infertility or like childlessness or whatever it might be, it typically does go to a much deeper place pretty quickly.
Yeah.
And I think people are very sensitive to it, I think, depending on what their experience is. I know certainly people who haven't been able to have children, obviously going through a lot of different emotions and so forth. So they're particularly sensitive to the conversation and how it's approached, and can sometimes misconstrue where things are coming from as well. And I think in general, what I'm finding is most people are quite positive about the conversation and are open to the conversation. But I think it really, we can have a bit of fun with this as well. I mean, we can have a bit of a laugh at ourselves, and we can, make fun of different things. And I think if we all just are a bit lighthearted and don't take it all so damn seriously sometimes, why not? Like, let's have a fun conversation.
Well, and that's been my point too, because a lot of the people that I've had on the podcast aren't even for sure decided about what type, what path they're going to choose, if they are going to have kids or not. And I just feel like a lot of the time, more often than not, people who don't have children are painted, especially if you're women, as being spinsters, lonely, your future is a dark wasteland. Yeah. No one will carry on your name. And that's just the opposite of what my life is, and even the phrase, even the term child-free, which I do identify with and I think is important. I oftentimes feel like I'm child-free with a very child-full life because a lot of people in my life have kids who are special to me. And that, that's the whole point of Auntie Julia, because I have relationships with children and I find joy in those. I just don't personally need them in my own home.
Yeah. Oh, look, I'm exactly the same way. I don't hate children. I mean, I might hate them on a plane or in a restaurant, but
there are times.
There's a time and a place, I think.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've got nieces and nephews and lots of friends that have kids. And one of my best friends, I'm actually going to spend a week with her in Cairns in June. And she's got 4 children. But I feel like a rock star when I go there because the kids always fight about who sits next to Auntie Tan and no, it's my turn. And they love seeing me and I love spending time with them. So I think exactly that. I think people have this perception that, if you're child-free, then you must hate children. It's just like, well, no, I just don't want them in my life full time. And I think
to be quite honest,
types of conversations can help change that perception.
Yes. I mean, I have a lot of friends who have kids who only like their own children. Like they're not about other people's kids. So that's why I also want to include parents in the conversation because it's just it's just kind of breaking down sort of societal structures. And, the fact is that we really don't need everybody to have children anymore for a lot of reasons.
Yeah.
And certainly the burden of having kids doesn't have to just be on women anymore. And I think it's okay to have fun with that and to take it seriously too. I don't want people to think that I'm flippant about anything because I have lots of friends. I've had friends who have children who have passed away. I've had friends who are unable to have children. So all of that is very, it's not lost on me. But I just think there was room to grow the conversation. And since I started the podcast, it's just been so fun because of course I've connected with you now and I've found all of these awesome women to follow and guys who are interested in talking about, what life without children looks like for them. And it's been a really cool year so far. So I'm super excited to connect with more and more people and see where all of this goes and grows. And it's really encouraging.
Speaking of men, I think this conversation is very much something that men should be involved in as well. But your partner Lane, I loved the last episode that you guys did together. That you gotta have a baby.
Yeah.
I do love that. I love Seinfeld and I love that episode. So when you were talking about it, I was cracking up laughing going, oh my God, I can so relate to this. So how long have you and your partner been together?
Yeah, well, we have a really good time together and we feel very lucky because Lane was only 24 when we started dating and I was 27. And so we were pretty young and it just kind of snowballed, like it just happened. I mean, we were living together after 3 months because he was living in an apartment that didn't have locks or heat. So I was like, no, I'm never going over there. So it just really kind of happened and we both just like caught each other at the right moment. But when we finally got to the, and obviously thinking back to this now as like a almost 35-year-old woman, I'm like, oh my gosh, what was I doing? Like I should have had this conversation immediately, but it just so happened that we were exactly on the same page about kids. Yeah. And as soon as we figured it out, it was just great because it was like, yeah, we can have a full life and fun and important moments together and build a family that just looks different in the way that we want it to look, so we do have a good time with it. And obviously like Lane is such a great guy because he clearly doesn't have a problem with me talking about everything and anything on the internet for all the world to hear.
Yeah, which I love. I think that's awesome. But I think what you said there was a really great point is that in fact we still have a family. It just looks different. Like I think you've got cats, haven't you? I've got dogs. Yeah. You know, and you don't have to have pets, obviously, to have a family. But I know some of my closest friends, I consider my family. You know,
yeah, I mean, everybody has like their own thing. And that's also something that I've learned too in this whole project, you know, the concept of child-free nurturing, and also the concept that people just don't want to nurture. Yeah. So you can have both, like I think there are, you know, lots of different types of child-free people too. I know we all get siloed together, but we are all different and unique, and we have our own points of view. And yeah, like I call them the teenies because we got them as these tiny little cats out of the trash, and they're our babies. So and yeah, I mean, it's been so fun, and like Lane is a cat guy, so he's like super in love with them too, and we just have fun with them. And it is enough. I spend so much money on these cats. I can't imagine, you know, and I can leave them at home alone. Like, it's fine. You know, and then there are people who just don't want to they have, you know, different hobbies that don't involve caretaking. Yeah. And that's important too. And they're valuable, and they're putting time and effort into things that build their communities as well. So we're all kind of doing our own thing in important and unique ways, and they deserve to be elevated just as much as parenting.
Yes, I agree, and that's exactly right. I mean, I'm a big believer in one of my mantras is make your own rules, and I think it's really important. Men and women actually do that and go, well, hang on. Traditionally, this is what, you know, a family looks like. This is what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to meet someone and get married and buy a house and have kids and all this sort of stuff. But I love the fact that now, we're probably really the first generation that's been able to do this, because I think of my mother and my grandmother. My grandmother certainly did not have a choice. She had 7 children. My mum had 2. But I think in their generation, it was very, very rare for a woman not to have children as well, and if they did, it was usually through the fact that they couldn't have them.
You're right.
Whereas now, I think we're the first generation to go, you know what, we're choosing to go, no, that's not for me. I can actually have a choice here. But there's still obviously so many women who I think don't fully appreciate or understand that, and they think, well, I'm expected to, or I've got pressure on me to, and I think that they're the women that I suppose I'm trying to reach out to have with conversations with. And if you want to have kids, that's fine. More than happy. Like, you want to go and have however many kids, that is totally cool. But I don't think you should have kids through expectation or pressure or any of those cultural issues, or just because, you know, you're doing it, just going through the motions. I think that's just, you know, wrong on a lot of levels. But
yeah, and I think, like, you know, I obviously still like, I always say that I'm able to talk openly and honestly about all of this stuff because I do have, like, the support of my friends and family. Yeah. And I've never really encountered, like, I don't have parents who are, like, disappointed in me in any capacity. And so I really do understand that that's a privilege and a value. But I know that the default is to think that somebody like me is sort of weird still. And
there's something wrong with us. Didn't you know that?
Yes. I mean, the number of times I've been told, like, you'll change your mind. And I think, like, also too, like, in this phase of my life in my mid-30s, I'm able to do a project like this. Whereas even though I've known since I was a kid that I didn't want to have kids, I didn't know how to verbalize that.
Yeah.
I didn't know how to really talk about it. And then when I got into my 20s, I started to realize, like, oh, it can be a choice. Like, I don't have to do it. But I know I wouldn't have been able to publicly declare myself as child-free without much harsher criticism. Yeah. Because even, like, the few conversations I would have, people would say, you'll change your mind, you'll grow out of it, you'll have regrets, like, you will, you know. And that's where it's like, I'm really trying to reach, I guess, also the people who just don't know they can be child-free, or that they don't even know that being a parent is a choice.
Yeah.
Because as you were saying, like, the steps, like, in life, like, you have to get married. I mean, that's another thing. Like, yes, I have a partner. I think he's my life partner, but I don't want to get married. We're not married, you know, and that's a value to me too, and that's a choice. But you don't have to live these steps in order to have a full and happy life where you are incorporated into the community
Exactly.
Just as much as anyone else, you know? So yeah, all of these things are really important, even if they feel kind of like obvious, you know, they just haven't been verbalized before. And so I do feel lucky to be alive in this moment because more and more of us are coming together, which I think is really special.
Yeah, look, I love it. And I think, look, one of the things that you touched on in one of the episodes, which I really related to, and I know one of the terms that I really don't like is the term breeders.
Yeah.
And, you know, I'm in a few sort of child-free groups on Facebook and so forth, and some of the ways that they speak about people with kids, I just find so rude and disrespectful. And I'm thinking, well, if you want people to respect your decision and your choice, how can you speak about them in that way? It actually makes me really quite mad, because I'm thinking I think those people are giving child-free people a bad name as such. But I just think you have to be respectful of other people's choices and decisions. And I don't know, some of the comments and the way that they speak, I'm just like, really? You're saying that?
Yeah.
I mean, do you come across much of that?
Well, you know, I'm very opinionated. So I think the people who kind of feel that way probably shy away from what I do, and that's perfectly fine. Yes, I think I'm probably in some of the same Facebook groups that you're in, so I know exactly what you're talking about. I think for me, it sets off alarm bells more than just makes me uncomfortable, because that type of language lends itself to sort of who is and isn't allowed to have children, which then gets into sort of a pretty despicable trait in human history of eugenics and ethnic cleansing even. And I feel like I don't know if they mean it all the time in that way, but to speak about people in animalistic fashion in any capacity, I just think is like a super red flag, even if you're doing it defensively. I do feel like a lot of child-free people do feel defensive. Yeah. And it comes across harsh because, you know, they haven't connected in a way where they're able to openly talk to others. I mean, that's like the thing that number one thing I get from listeners on the podcast is they feel a connection to a like-minded person. And that they hear me talking to my friends. And so they know that it's possible to have that connection in real life, but they don't have it yet. And so I do have sensitivity to the harshness, because I really think it comes from a place of self-preservation, especially in those Facebook groups. I think it's like sort of like a safe space to be bad. And I hope more than anything that they're not taking that into the real world, because I do think that terminology, it's inappropriate in any context. Yes. And so that's like the other thing. I don't think it's a rational or substantive point of view to totally diminish someone else's life choice about their family dynamics just because it's adverse to what you've chosen for yourself. And even if we're coming from more of the marginalized group, you don't get to lob that back at parents, you know? So it's complicated across the board, of course, when you're talking about reproduction and anything like that. But I've had the same sense that like, there's some weird, I mean, the term crotch dropping. I am just like, who came up with that?
I couldn't believe it. When I've read some of these terms, I'm just like, what?
I know.
Oh my God.
But it's just like, well, now we've gone to a point where I cannot go, because, you know, I'm for women, and that, you know, like I know, especially in the US, we have a real crisis with maternal mortality. Yeah. And especially with Black women. And these are all real issues. I mean, healthcare is just such a factor here. And of course, that affects all women more than anyone. And even if I choose not to use my womb for reproductive services, I'm still connected to that community. And so I do want to stand up for the rights of those in my community. Yeah. And so that's more of where I come from it, which I know is not I think some of the more radical people think that we should just be kind of like burning stakes and just like no children ever. But I don't know then, I don't know what the end goal of that is either, because, well, we have to have children.
Yeah.
Society, you know, like we can have less of them for sure.
Yeah.
And we can talk about that, but I don't know where we go. You know, I need more podcast listeners.
Yeah. It's, yeah, I mean, I know that there's a lot of pro-choice stuff happening at the moment. Sorry, I hope you can't hear my dogs bark. I'm looking after a couple of dogs at the moment, and they're downstairs barking. I can hear them. I hope that you can't hear them because they're driving me crazy.
Oh, I haven't really noticed.
Oh, good. Okay. One of the things I was talking to Therese Schechter about last week when we chatted was this pro-choice conversation. Now, I've always been pro-choice. Mm-hmm. One of the things that makes me really mad is I don't know how anybody, let alone a white male, can make a choice about what I can do with my body. Right. So I've always believed in women doing whatever is right for them and for their life, because I think forcing people to have children that they don't want just causes a whole bunch of other issues on society. Yeah. But I feel like this is a big conversation at the moment in the US. I'm seeing all these things popping up and articles and things in groups about this anti-abortion, any abortionists and all that sort of stuff. Have you what has been your experience with that over there? Have you had many conversations around that, or have you spoken to anyone on the podcast about any of those types of things?
Well, so I do. One of my tags for the podcast is that we are enthusiastically pro-choice. So that is a value to me that's very important. Yeah. I think you're probably noticing it more and more in the US because with Donald Trump in office and him being able to select our Supreme Court justices, he's putting more and more conservative, anti-Roe v. Wade, which is our legal decision that gave women the right to abortion. He's putting people in place who have, for their entire careers, had it be a goal to take away that right. Many states, Ohio just passed a bill it makes it now illegal to have an abortion after 6 weeks, even in the case of rape and incest. So a lot of really scary things are happening here where women in vulnerable communities in the center of our country. So like I live in New York City, for instance. I work right around the corner from a Planned Parenthood. The protesters are only there when it's nice and warm outside. They're not that dedicated, and they're usually teenage boys. However, they're there. And so we're really experiencing sort of a religious-led backlash to women's reproductive rights. And so I just think, like to choose to be child-free by choice, I can't turn my back on that movement. Not that I ever would anyway, but it all seems to go hand in hand, including different birth control options, things like that, the right to my body to decide what I want to do, and for others to have that right too. So
it feels like it's moved back. We've gone back 200 or 300 years. I mean, we've made all this movement in so many ways with the LGBT communities and transgender and race and color and all these things. And then this one thing, it's like it's stepped 200, 300 years backwards. Like I don't quite understand how that works.
Yeah, it's really exhausting. I think the thing of it that just keeps me motivated is knowing that women have come before me, have faced a much harder life and path. And that, progress kind of ebbs and flows, unfortunately. And I think that also is coming from sort of a privileged position, in my place in society. I think if need be, I would be able to get an abortion to figure it out, even if it became illegal, right? Because we know this, like even before abortion was legalized, rich women were able to get abortions without problem. It's our poor and vulnerable communities that are always affected. Even now with legalized abortion, those are the women who aren't able to get to the clinics. Those are the women who aren't able to afford the procedures. And, so really it's not even just about women's rights. It's a social justice movement entirely. And so, I think what keeps me going is knowing that I want to be a person who uses my privilege for good and to advance the rights of the less fortunate. And also to speak for women, because I'm proud of that tradition. I'm proud of, feminists who have come before me. And I think it's like, to me, it's a no-brainer.
Yeah.
Now, if you have listened to the podcast, I'm from a religious background. So I do know a lot of people who are very anti-abortion. And I would like to say that I am on the front lines with those people telling them what I think.
Go girl, you go.
So it is like, and I do understand it a little bit. I mean, I understand not liking abortion, sort of. For me personally,
if you don't want one, if you don't believe in it, then don't have one. It's as simple. No one's telling you that you have to have it, but just leave the choice open for other people. So, and it's the same with religion. Okay? If you're religious, then that's fine. As long as, you're not going to push it onto me, then I don't have a problem with that. Why can't you just do your thing and let me do my thing, and we all just are happy and coexist?
Exactly. And I think that's kind of like that's like the angle that I've taken with my friends who don't necessarily like abortion. Instead of trying to make them like it or to make them understand it in the way that I understand it, what I say to them is, okay, but you believe that individual women should have the right to their own bodies, correct? And most of them do.
Yeah.
I think most people are more sensible than not. And so then I say, then you're the one that has to speak to the religious radicals who are trying to take away rights for all people. You're the ones that also have to rise up against the violent anti-choicers. And really, if you say you're pro-life, then that also means you've got to start fighting for, you've got to overturn the death penalty. You need to make sure our healthcare systems are good.
Yeah.
You need to make sure that children who are born into this world are taken care of while they're here.
Yeah.
Because a lot of pro-life activists forget all of that. So that's really where I try to shift the conversation.
You're so right. Exactly. That's all about life. So all those other things should come into that conversation. I'd actually never thought of that before. So I love that, that you've said that, because it is part of that whole, thing about life and choice. It's a big conversation, isn't it? It's one that people get very passionate about. I know I'm certainly very passionate about being pro-choice, and I know that obviously the anti-abortionists and so forth are very passionate about what they think, and I think we can all just coexist. We just we believe different things, and let's just accept that we believe different things and be fine with it. Yeah,
we can. I mean, there are some people who will not recognize humanity in others, though, and those people I'm like, all right, bye. Like there are people that you do have to just, cut loose, and you have to say like, all right, well, we are against each other.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to get through to you, and you're not going to get through to me. And that's okay. Good luck to you in your health and life, but I hope you fail miserably at these weird goals that you have of controlling other people. I don't really get it. Like last week, I walked by the Planned Parenthood in our neighborhood, and it was a beautiful day. And there were like, it looked like a church youth group was visiting just to protest the Planned Parenthood. And it's all these like teen boys. They're in New York. We're in Manhattan, and it's like, go enjoy the day. Celebrate your precious life.
Boys are obviously being influenced by their parents and by adults above them.
And that's what you'll notice in the States. Most anti-choice activists who are on the lines are children, teenagers, and college students. Because the church youth groups, they're the ones that send them out, And the people who are fighting for the rights and doing it in a smart, intelligent way are those of us who need the rights. Now, and that's also where I will say men can step up a lot more, because we are really under the gun here with abortion rights in the U.S. And there are so many men who are progressive, and it's just not one of their talking points. And so that's what I'm seeing here that's really encouraging. Women are sort of shifting the lecture onto our progressive men and saying like, hey, we actually need you to start getting into this conversation because it affects you. Like God forbid, if I got pregnant for whatever reason, it's just as much on Lane for me to have my choice to have an abortion as it is on me. Sure, it's my body, and but he doesn't want the kid either. He's child free as well.
Yeah, so, the conversation is always obviously focused towards women because we're the ones that are pregnant and having the baby and all that sort of thing. But I totally agree with you. The conversation in general around choice and being child free and so forth impacts men as well, because there's a lot of men who don't want to have children, as you said. So, I think given that some of these men, I think a lot of men are in influential positions, they can actually have a positive impact on this conversation. I think it would be I think it would be great if they stepped up and went, you know what, this is not just a conversation that women, should be fighting for and having. It should be something that we all are as a society and as a community.
Right. Yeah, and it's part of a healthy society. Abortion is just a medical procedure. It's healthcare. It's certainly not what it's twisted to be in a lot of the folklore around it.
Yeah.
And
a lot of propaganda around it and untruths and stuff. Yeah. Yeah.
If you're a rationally minded person, you need to delete the emotion from it and just be. We're handling this once and for all. Be quiet.
I mean, and I think certainly the child-free conversation, and I know we were talking about this before we started recording, is seems to be more and more prominent. I mean, I've certainly noticed it since I wrote my book and when I was doing my research, how many conversations and how many books and movies and things are coming out about women being child-free. I think we've still got a long way to go because there's still this holy grail of being a mother and so forth put out there by so many Hollywood movies and society in general and media and all that sort of stuff. But I don't know, so I'm finding that there seems to be more and more women like yourself who are starting podcasts and writing books and creating movies like Therese and Maxie and those guys. And now it all seems to be, there seems to be this movement happening and we're all connecting going, hey, how can we all create more of this conversation in society and push it out there as much as possible to let people know that there are a choice. Are you finding a similar thing?
Yes, definitely. It's coming up all the time. I'm definitely seeing it a lot more in magazine articles and on blogs that I read. There are a few more podcasts that have come up since I've started too, and we all have our unique take on the conversation. And that's awesome. There's so much to add to this, and there are so many unique angles to it that are really important. And I feel but I think you're right. We're not there yet so for the podcast, I started a book club because I thought, this will be great to get more content and to focus my ideas. And it has been so difficult because I want to not only read about first-person nonfiction accounts, but I would love to read a great novel about a woman who just kids aren't even in the picture and it's not an approach, or a fantasy, something, and so it's been challenging because it's I'll pick up a book and I'll start, and I don't want to only choose books I've read.
Yeah.
So I'll pick up a book and I'll be reading and it sounds really exciting and great. And then all of a sudden a long lost teen child shows up out of nowhere. It's just no, now I'm just totally uninterested.
Yeah.
Or if a woman is childless in a book or movie or whatever, it's a loss of some sort.
Yes, they're always longing for a child and all that sort of stuff. Exactly.
And or there are great examples of people where kids have nothing to do with it and it's super fun. And then what comes out? Bridget Jones has a baby. Why? What? She didn't have a baby. Why couldn't we just have Bridget Jones?
Why couldn't you just be happy?
Why couldn't there just have been another fun movie? Why did she need a baby? And so that's where it is that. And that's also what I've tried to do with the podcast. So Lane and I talking about Seinfeld, which the other thing that has come up since I've been so, ingratiated into the child-free community is you have a different lens on what you're watching. So you're really looking for child-free examples in popular culture. And so, and like, I've seen Seinfeld so many times.
Me too.
And I've never watched it with the child-free view.
Yeah.
And then it was like, oh, this is like the most child-free show of all time. If a kid is on this show, the kid is being made fun of. You know, like no one wants the kid.
Yeah.
And you know, and then there's the great character of Elaine, who's solidly child-free.
Yeah.
At least in this realm of existence. If they bring it back in any capacity, who knows what they'll have done to her.
Yeah.
But it, you know, there are really good examples out there. And so that's what I do want to highlight. I think, are you familiar with Golden Girls?
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
So I'm one of my friends and I, we just brought up Golden Girls kind of randomly because, you know, one of the classic questions that child-free women get is, who will take care of you when you're old?
Yes.
And, you know, Golden Girls is just this classic sitcom that everyone loves about these 4 older women who are the best of friends. And they're all mothers, including, you know, Dorothy and Sophia are mother and daughter, so they don't count as much. But their kids are terrible. They're not in the picture at all. Like, their lives are full and exciting because they don't have the kids in them.
Yeah.
You know? And so it's like, that's like a huge pop culture answer. Who will take care of you when you're older? I don't know. Does anyone know?
No. Yeah, exactly. Having kids doesn't guarantee that.
No. So I mean, I've definitely been more geared to look for the references and to seek them out. And it's a hard thing. It's a challenge because there could be a great show of 20 something. I mean, like Girls, for instance, was a pretty good show. And then they ruined it by making this woman who should never be a mother for no purpose outside of showing that she's aged into a woman. I don't know. That was like so gross and like annoying. But you know, so I think we're still kind of, I am not talented enough to write a novel, so I hope there will be people who listen to my podcast who hear me plead and beg for child-free content who come to make it. So, you know, that's why these conversations are important. We don't know who's listening. We don't know what gets internalized and what will come out of that. Yeah. And that's where, you know, it's important. And that's why I feel proud of it. And I've only really taken away positives.
Yeah, I love it. I love everything about that. I think exactly. You don't know who's listening. You don't know who's out there, and maybe it sparks an idea or something that they can go and run with it and create something amazing that we can, you know, continue this conversation around. Now, I'm just conscious of time running out. Before we go, I've got one last question to ask, and it's more around your advice, I suppose. What advice would you give to a woman who is maybe undecided about having children or doesn't quite know how to figure all this out?
Well, I think my first piece of advice would be to give yourself time. There's no timeline or time frame that you need to live up to make any of these decisions.
Yeah.
And and people will very rightfully say, well, there's a biological clock or whatever, which I personally believe is sort of bullshit.
Well, it's proven there actually is no such thing scientifically as the biological clock. So
right. And women are having babies into their like early 50s now. So everything is being extended, whatever. But I also think that the fallacy of the biological clock is that if you don't make a decision by a certain amount of time, then you've made a wrong decision. Well, also maybe not, if you just wait it out and you just having kids never happens for you and it's never a firm choice, maybe that's a choice, like maybe you did make the choice. It's just that you didn't stamp it and proclaim it to the world.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that your life has been a failure or that you've taken a misstep or that you'll have regrets, So I think it's up to each individual. And I think it's a hard thing for anyone to kind of figure out. But I just think you should be true to yourself and you should be kind to yourself.
Yeah.
And if you're getting pressure from anybody and it's feeling like pressure, then I think you have the answer. You don't want it, and that's okay. And you're not a weirdo or a freak. And if you think that you want to be child-free and you end up just having a kid and you love it, then that is great too. You know?
Yeah.
Like, I mean,
Exactly.
there's not one way to be. So I would just say, give yourself time, be gentle to yourselves, and also trust yourself, because only you know what's best for you. Even if, especially as women, we always have a million people telling us what we should be doing.
Yep.
And I really just think that the older I get, the more I realize that I've always known who I actually am. It's just about silencing the other people around me, you know?
Yeah.
And, you know when to take advice or whatever, but like, it really comes down to who you are and what you want, and you're going to figure it out best for you. And that's true for everybody.
Love it.
Know?
I think that's great advice. I totally agree. It's been great chatting to you. I'm sure we could probably have this conversation for hours.
Yeah, I'm very chatty.
No, like I'm just saying, like I think we're both so passionate about the topic as well. And like, it's the same as when I've had conversations with like Marsha and Therese and all that. Like, we can literally just keep going. Go, we probably need to go and do some work now. But like, let's just keep talking about it. But maybe we can revisit this and have another chat at another time as well, because I think you've got so much to share with the world, and I love having these conversations. So thank you very much for your time and being able to chat.
Thank you.
Great to talk to you. Bye.
Yes. Bye.